The engagement party was supposed to be a celebration, a joyful evening filled with laughter, love, and the promise of a new chapter for my sister. Instead, it quickly became a showcase of my parents' cruelty, a reminder that some people are eager to humiliate the very ones they should cherish. From the moment we arrived, I could feel their eyes on me. Not with warmth, not with pride, but with judgment. My sister, radiant in her engagement attire, glowed under the attention of her fiancé's family. And there I was, standing beside my boyfriend, trying to blend into the background, hoping the evening wouldn't spiral into a spectacle of embarrassment. It didn't take long. My mother, with her thinly veiled disdain, leaned toward my father and whispered loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "Why is she even bringing him? Honestly, he's not good enough for her, or anyone." My father smirked, glancing at my boyfriend with an air of superiority. "Well, at least he's practical. Not that he really belongs in this family's circle." I froze for a moment, cheeks burning. Conversations paused around us, and I felt the familiar weight of humiliation pressing down. Guests exchanged awkward glances, unsure whether to intervene or pretend nothing was happening. My boyfriend, however, remained calm, offering a polite smile and standing tall, which only made my parents' condescension more glaring. For a few minutes, I wondered if I should retreat, if I should leave to avoid further embarrassment. But I stayed. I straightened my posture, smiled politely at relatives, and refused to let their words ruin the night entirely. I realized that if I allowed their mockery to define me, it would win. Yet beneath the forced composure, a quiet spark of defiance ignited. Every smirk, every whispered insult, every public jab became fuel, not to fight them directly, but to ensure that my life, my choices, and my partner's worth would one day speak louder than their ridicule ever could. Little did I know that not everyone was taken in by their judgment. In the crowd, my sister's future father-in-law observed carefully, eyes narrowing slightly as he assessed the situation. He wasn't fooled by their snide remarks or superficial opinions. Something in my boyfriend, his calm, confident presence, his warmth and integrity, caught his attention. And in that moment, I felt the tiniest flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone else could see what my parents refused to. After the initial sting of my parents' mockery, I realized I had two choices: crumble under their judgment or stand quietly strong. I chose the latter. My boyfriend squeezed my hand gently, sensing my unease, and I returned the gesture with a small, steady smile. His calm presence was a shield against the humiliation, reminding me that their words carried no real weight outside their own narrow world. I focused on the guests around us, engaging politely in conversations, asking questions, and laughing when appropriate. I refused to let my parents' cruel commentary dictate the mood of the evening or diminish the pride I felt for my sister. Even as whispers lingered near my parents, half amused, half judging, I reminded myself, my worth and the worth of the person I loved were not defined by them. All the while, I noticed subtle signs that some people were observing the tension with more interest than I had expected. My sister's fiancé's family exchanged glances, clearly aware of my parents' behavior. The way his father watched my boyfriend, however, was different. There was curiosity in his gaze, a quiet assessment, as if he were looking beyond appearances and into something deeper. The rest of the evening blurred into a series of polite smiles, clinking glasses, and carefully delivered toasts. Yet beneath the surface, I felt a growing sense of quiet confidence. For years, my parents had tried to define me, to humiliate me, to dictate who I could be and whom I could love. Tonight, I realized that I didn't need their approval, or anyone else's. to hold my head high. Even in their presence, even under the weight of their ridicule, I discovered a sense of personal strength I hadn't fully recognized before. My boyfriend's quiet dignity amplified it. He wasn't defensive or bitter, he simply was, and that authenticity spoke volumes. By the time the evening began winding down, I noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Some of the guests, particularly my sister's future father-in-law, now looked at us differently. Respect replaced judgment. Curiosity replaced doubt. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. And in that subtle recognition, I realized something important. Sometimes the strongest statement isn't shouted. Sometimes the most powerful message is simply standing tall, refusing to be diminished, and letting others witness your integrity firsthand. Tonight, I was doing exactly that. As the engagement party continued, I felt a quiet shift in the energy around us. My parents had made their judgment clear. They had scoffed, whispered, and mocked. But not everyone in the room shared their view. Some guests, especially my sister's future father-in-law, seemed to watch with careful attention, as if analyzing more than just appearances. I could feel his gaze on my boyfriend, not in judgment, but in consideration. The way he carried himself, calm and confident, despite the obvious hostility from my parents, drew attention without effort. My boyfriend wasn't loud or boastful. He simply demonstrated competence, charm, and intelligence in every interaction. He answered questions with clarity, made thoughtful observations, and engaged genuinely with everyone who approached. At one point, the future father-in-law approached us. My parents were busy with other guests, their condescending smirks no longer carrying weight in this moment. He extended his hand toward my boyfriend, a polite but firm greeting. "I've been observing," he said, his tone curious but approving. "You handle yourself very well, especially considering some of the commentary tonight." My boyfriend chuckled lightly, a quiet, self-assured laugh. "Thank you. I'm just focused on supporting her and celebrating this special occasion." The future father-in-law nodded thoughtfully, clearly impressed by both the humility and the competence he saw. "It's rare to find someone so steady and respectful," he continued. "I can see why she values you." I felt a flush of pride, not just for myself, but for the man who had stood by me through years of judgment, who had faced my parents' disdain without faltering. This moment, brief as it was, validated everything we had worked for: the integrity, the respect, the unwavering presence. Around us, other guests began to notice the interaction. Whispers shifted from amusement at my parents' critique to admiration for my boyfriend's poise. The contrast was clear. Where my parents had attempted to belittle, the truth was shining through. For the first time that evening, I saw the impact of quiet strength and genuine character. My parents' mockery was powerless against it. The recognition in the room, led by someone who truly mattered, the future father-in-law, was undeniable. In that moment, I realized that respect and recognition could be earned in ways my parents would never understand, and that sometimes the most powerful statements were made without a single harsh word, just presence, integrity, and unwavering composure. By the time the evening was drawing to a close, the energy in the room had shifted completely. What had started as a tense, uncomfortable engagement party, tainted by my parents' mockery, had transformed into a quiet affirmation of truth. My parents' condescension, once the center of attention, had faded into the background, replaced by admiration and respect for my boyfriend. I noticed it first in the way my sister's future father-in-law stood slightly straighter, his expression serious yet approving. He had been observing, weighing, and finally recognizing something my parents had refused to see: my boyfriend's character. His intelligence, his loyalty, and the way he treated me, not as a subordinate or less than, but as an equal and partner. "Thank you for standing by her," he said quietly as he shook my boyfriend's hand one last time. "It speaks volumes about your integrity and respect. Anyone can talk, but few live up to their words. You do." I felt a swell of pride. Not for myself, exactly, but for the partnership we had built, for the quiet strength we had cultivated together. Every time my parents had belittled him, or me, he had remained steadfast. Now, someone whose opinion truly mattered was recognizing that strength. Even other guests had begun to whisper among themselves, their expressions filled with newfound respect. My parents' repeated jabs and their public mockery no longer carried weight. Instead, they highlighted the contrast between their pettiness and the dignity my boyfriend and I projected. It was almost poetic. Their attempt to belittle had inadvertently underscored our worth. I caught my parents' eyes from across the room. Their expressions were rigid, forced, and uncomfortably aware. They had hoped to dominate the narrative, to control how others perceived us. But the tide had turned. The very people they had expected to approve of their judgment were seeing the truth. Their mockery had failed. Their opinion irrelevant. I realized in that moment how freeing it was to rise above humiliation, to remain composed, and to let integrity do the speaking. I didn't need to argue, explain, or defend myself. The respect and recognition from those who mattered most had already rewritten the story. By the time the night ended, it was clear. The turning point wasn't confrontation. It was quiet confidence, presence, and undeniable character. My parents had mocked us, but in the end, it was their judgment that had been exposed, and ours that had been validated. And as we left the party hand in hand, I knew one thing for certain: their mockery would no longer define us. We had won, not through anger or retaliation, but through the power of truth and steadfast love.